Good afternoon, my friends. How's everyone doing today? It's a little bit cold out here, so I've got my down vest on, and I'm still pretty chilly, but it's better to make videos outside, right? It's more inspiring. I wasn't even sure exactly how I was going to tackle this subject. I have a few different things I wanted to talk about, but it's all about understanding ourselves better. And before I came out to make the video, I thought, it's really funny. I cannot stand self-help books, but I'm writing a self-help book, if you will. Not self-help, but rather, I should say I'm not writing it at the moment, but my intention long-term is to gather my thoughts over the years, to compile them, and to be able to find out what's worked for me, but also what's worked for other people, rather than just being one guy who says, this is how you should live your life, because that's preposterous. And that's why I can't stand gurus and self-help books for the most part. They're very pretentious, and let me just say this, I'm not judgmental towards those who are younger, but let's say if a 20-year-old kid writes a book about how to live life, obviously people aren't going to take it as seriously as someone who is, say, 60, 70, who's actually shown their life, who has a life behind them to show how that's worked. But the purpose and intention behind it is often, the hardest thing to discern. My thoughts always revolve around how to better ourselves as people, and sometimes I step back and think, you have your own problems. Why do you even talk about things that, that you can't change, or that, it's kind of like a person can have opinions that teach themselves, if that makes sense. You can learn from yourself and your own thoughts and ideas by just conveying them in words. Our minds are just a jumble of ideas and thoughts, but once you put them out into language or on paper, it's different. So I think, to get to the point here, one of the things that we do that is a few of the damaging things that I took note on that our society does to each other that cause us the turmoil we're in, and why we can't hold a civil conversation with one another to learn from each other, is because we belittle each other's opinions. Before we even hear what another person has to say, we instantly tell them, no, I don't believe that's true. Or we've already basically just, said, well, I don't care what you have to say, but you can say it anyway. And I think it's really crucial that we always listen with an open eye, an open mind, and open ears, and make sure we're actually listening. When we refuse to listen to others, then they refuse to listen to others and to us, and we end up with the, nobody wants to hear anything anymore. And this is how we get to where we're at right now, the whole fake news controversy and everything I don't want to hear is fake kind of attitude. So often when we get into discussions today, and you see it a lot in the comment sections and on videos, is that when a person doesn't like what a person has to say, instead of disputing what they're saying, they use fallacies and ad hominem attacks or personal attacks. So they'll say, oh, you liberals, or oh, you rednecks, or oh, you this or you that, pointing the finger at the person, their heritage, culture, beliefs, whatever it might be, completely ignoring the subject at hand. And I think that that's one of the most damaging things that we can do is if you have a dispute with an opinion or an idea, it's okay to express yourself, as long as you're not resorting to, poking fun at the way a person looks, or something like that. But it happens a lot with adults. Another note is knowing your rival, and this is one of the roots of why politics is so bad right now. And I would say, on that note, a lot of people, whenever I mention political things, people say, oh, I'm not involved in politics, I don't want to have anything to do with it, I just want to live my life. I do too, we all do. But we are forced to. The older you get, the more you realize that you may not have to vote in every election or on every issue, but there are times when it's I shouldn't say required, but where we do need to voice our opinions. And sometimes voting is our only voice, so it may be useless a lot of the times. But I've been through this lately with, ambivalent. That's my word of the week. Been ambivalent towards the, having mixed feelings towards this whole whether I should even bother voting or if it even makes a difference thing. But the point being that in politics, we all deal with it. If your neighbor complains about something and calls the cops because they don't like the way your yard looks, which happened like to somebody I know recently, and you have to deal with that, it doesn't matter if you're not into politics, the politics come to you. So even though you may not vote or be interested in laws right now, it will come back and haunt us in the future unless we move off to somewhere else, but we're going to deal with the same problems. But there's a major key component missing from today's politics, like, the suits. Instead of knowing your rival, they have started shutting each other out. And it wasn't always like this. Even up through the 80s, there were still the left and the right, for example, would get together and they'd actually hold conversations. And say presidential candidates that were running, they actually knew each other personally from beforehand. Even if you completely disagree with the person and hate all of their opinions and could never agree on a single thing with them, if you've met them and you know them personally, you're willing to shake hands and just agree to disagree on some things. This is how, like, for example, I've had friends who have completely different views than mine, and we may argue and say, no, that's bullshit, that's bullshit, that's bullshit, and in the end, we're still friends. If politicians never make friends, if they never even meet the other side, then you can make them faceless enemy. This is what we've been doing with soldiers going to war forever. Tell them that the enemy is out to get them and strip them of their humanity, and just make them an enemy. And that's what politicians are doing to each other, but that's what they're doing to us too, right now. All of us. We're doing it to ourselves. So stop generalizing. It's really important that we realize this. When people say, well, you're either a liberal or you're conservative. No, that's completely bullshit. There are more independents in this country than either of those parties. There are more independents than there are Democrats, more independents than there are conservatives, Republicans. A majority of people are pretty intelligent-minded, that's all I can say. That people are aware that things are more complicated than just pointing the finger and hating the other side just because. So meet your enemy, know your enemy. A lot of people would say, well, just don't make enemies. It's like, I should say, meet your competition or meet your disagreement. And today we're afraid to hear dissenting opinions to the point where we're banning people from speaking because we think of it as hate speech just because we disagree with what they're saying. And then people have to learn to do their own research. This is it. Stop listening to individuals tell you how to vote, how to think, whether it be our parents or our pastor or our friends and family. We are all influenced by our environment. If any one of you stop and think right now, why am I influenced to think the way I am, and really start tracing it back, you can say, okay, well, my father was this way, and I ran into this issue at school, and maybe I dislike cops because I was beaten by one, or maybe I'm super, maybe you're a person who's very active in social causes because you've been wronged somehow in the past, or someone you know has. Sometimes these adversities that happen to us force us to want to act out and to speak out on behalf of these things, and to remember that there are people on our side. Not everybody is your enemy. I mean, I think this is the most crucial thing to realize, is that there are plenty of folks out there who really think that everyone's out to get them, that somebody's going to take their kid off the playground. I mean, you know how rare it is for a stranger to come and take a kid off of a playground, but now the parents won't even let their kids play down the street? Parents are getting arrested and fined because they let their kids go down to the park by themselves. They call them free-range parents now. I mean, it's just a different world, and we're trying it on for size. We're feeling out all these new ideas, but there's so much disagreement because we're so ignorant, because we haven't looked into things enough ourselves. Look into facts, figures, statistics. That's all I can say about it, I guess. I also wanted to give, a few words of wisdom from a kid, okay? These are 7 things I wrote down, 7 things we can learn from children. I was going to make a separate video about this, and I might, just for that sake, because I know my videos tend to run long. But I'm going to throw it in on the end of this one. What we can learn from children. Number 1, don't hold grudges. My kid will run off crying about something, and he'll come right back, and he'll be fine. Let it go. Number 2, always ask questions and be curious. Seems like when we get to a certain age, we decide we just know enough, and we don't need to ask many more questions. We'll just kind of live our lives the way we do, and that's fine for some people. But if you want to be well-rounded in all these things in life, you have to keep asking questions. Number 3, differences in appearance mean little. It seems like it's the parents that point out to the kid, oh, it's okay that this other person is black or Mexican or whatever, and the kid says, what? Oh, I didn't even notice. I mean, kids really don't think that way until we teach them to think that way. It's not that you can't notice differences. The whole I don't see color BS, that comes from the adults. The kids really don't care, you know? And I understand that later we learn a lot to protect ourselves against others, so maybe kids are ignorant in certain ways, but that's for a different conversation. Number 4, everything is awesome. To kids, everything is great. You know, it doesn't mean that they're always happy, but they don't see the world negatively. They don't say, oh man, why do people do this or that? They're just honestly curious and interested. And number 5, don't take lessons personal. If you teach a kid something, they learn it. You try to teach an adult something, they think that you're condescending, and they will shut you down. Number 6, let emotions come and go. And that's one I think all of us could learn from. Parents can learn that from their kids. The kids will get all upset, and then the next minute they're happy, and we'll think, well, God, what are the kids like, bipolar? You know, they haven't learned to manage their emotions yet. And to an extent that's true. But to an extent they are also able to just let it go when they need to. We tend to bottle things up, and we all know it's true. And sometimes you can't sit there and cry in the office because you had a bad day or a breakup. You do learn to hold those things in, but if you hold them in too long, then you never get to mourn or deal with your problems, just like you never get to get frustrated if you don't get truly, not hostile, not angry, but be outspoken and speak your mind. And then you won't have to get angry, because often anger comes from our own misunderstanding and ignorance of others' intentions. So, and the final one is embrace your passions. Find your passions and just embrace them. Kids get into something and they move on to something else. They're doing what they're doing. They're not questioning the source or how other people view them for it. They find something that interests them and they do it. And life is too short to not, right? You know, and I, as a person, I guess I am a little bit childish myself when I come to think of it in the way that I handle life. You know, I'm always in awe of the world, and I take each day as it comes. But also, being an adult in the Western world today, that makes it very difficult. So I'm trying to understand my fellow man, understand myself, and hopefully getting better every year. And hopefully all y'all are too. Talk to you later. Have a wonderful day.